The morning sun poured gently through the windows of the small apartment. 8-year-old Amara tied the straps of her yellow backpack, her curls bouncing as she moved. Her father, David, stood by the kitchen counter, sipping his coffee while watching her carefully. He always made sure she was ready before school, double-checking her homework, her lunchbox, and most importantly, her smile, but this morning was different. Amara's smile was missing. She tugged at her red dress nervously and avoided her father's eyes. "Amara," David said softly, kneeling down. "What's wrong? You don't seem happy today." Amara bit her lip and whispered, "Daddy." The bus driver, he did it again. The words hit David like a thunderclap. His heart raced, his hands tightening around the coffee cup. He had heard her say something similar before, but each time she grew quiet when he asked questions. Today, though, her eyes glistened with tears, her voice trembling as she clutched his sleeve. David crouched lower, trying to keep his voice calm. "What do you mean, sweetheart? What did the bus driver do?" She shook her head, as if scared to speak. He scares me. He yells, he looks at me funny, and yesterday, he stopped the bus and Her voice broke, and she buried her face in his chest. David's blood boiled. Every instinct as a father told him something was terribly wrong. He hugged her tightly, his mind racing with possibilities. "All right," he said firmly, standing up. "Today I'm not letting this go. You're not alone in this, Amara. I'll be there." Minutes later, they walked together toward the corner where the yellow school bus usually stopped. David's jaw was tight, his fists clenched, his eyes scanning the street. When the bus screeched to a halt, the sound made Amara flinch. The doors hissed open. Behind the wheel sat Mr. Grayson, the bus driver, a man in his late 50s, with a grizzled beard and tired eyes. But there was something about his stare that unsettled David instantly. Cold, calculating. "Morning," Mr. Grayson muttered, his voice low and gruff. His eyes lingered on Amara for a moment too long. David placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Go on, sweetheart. I'll be right here watching." Amara hesitated at the bus steps, glancing back at her father, her lips trembling. Slowly, she climbed on board. But as she passed the driver, David saw it, the way Grayson leaned slightly, muttering something under his breath. Amara stiffened and rushed to a seat near the front. David's heart pounded. He took a step closer to the bus. "What did you just say to her?" The driver smirked faintly. "Nothing. Kids exaggerate. She'd be fine." That smirk was the spark that lit the fire in David's chest. He pulled out his phone, his hands shaking not from fear but from fury. His thumb hovered over the dial pad. He had promised Amara that she was not alone. Through the bus window, Amara's wide eyes met his. Tears clung to her lashes. She mouthed. Silently, "Please, Daddy." David pressed the numbers. 911, 911, "What's your emergency?" A calm voice answered. David's voice trembled, yet it carried the weight of every father's fury. "This is David Miller. I need help immediately. My little girl just told me her bus driver has been doing things that scare her. And I just saw his behavior myself. I don't trust him with my daughter or any other child. Send someone now." The operator responded quickly, asking for details, location, and the bus number. David gave it all, his eyes never leaving the driver. Mr. Grayson's face paled. As he realized Ave was calling the police, Amara pressed her small hands against the window, watching her father with a fragile sense of hope. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe because her father was fighting for her, but David knew this was only the beginning. Whatever was happening here was darker than he could yet imagine. He wasn't just protecting Amara, he was stepping into a war he hadn't planned for, and he would fight it to the very end. The bus rolled down the street with a heavy groan, its yellow frame rattling as children inside whispered nervously. Amara sat near the front, her backpack hugged tightly against her chest, eyes darting between the window and the driver. Every bump in the road seemed louder than usual, every second heavier. David stayed at the corner long after the bus disappeared. His phone still in hand. He replayed the 911 operator's words. "An officer will arrive shortly to take a report. Please remain calm and keep yourself and your child safe." But how could a father remain calm when his daughter was in the hands of a man she feared? He paced the sidewalk, his heart pounding. Something about the way the driver looked at Amara. Something about that smirk. It wasn't just rude or dismissive. It was threatening. Dark. David's instincts screamed at him. This wasn't a matter to brush aside. Too many stories had begun just like this. Ignored warnings, overlooked fears. He wasn't going to let his little girl be another headline. Minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up. Officer Martinez stepped out, a tall woman with steady eyes and a notebook in hand. "Mr. Miller?" she asked. "Yes," David said quickly. "My daughter," she said. The driver scared her. "She cried this morning. And today, when she got on, I saw it myself." He muttered something, leaned toward her. "He's been doing something. I don't know what, but she's terrified." The officer's gaze hardened. Did she explain what exactly he did before? David shook his head. "She's only 8. She struggles to put it into words, but fear doesn't lie. I know my child. Something is wrong." Officer Martinez nodded, jotting notes. "Where is the bus headed now?" "Jefferson Elementary." "Just down the road." "All right. I'll call it in. Another unit will intercept the bus. We'll make sure your daughter is safe." The words gave David a measure of relief, but his chest remained tight. He couldn't shake the image of Amara's teary eyes. Inside the bus, Amara's small hands fidgeted in her lap. She could hear Mr. Grayson humming low under his breath, a tune that made her skin crawl. Occasionally, he glanced at the mirror, his eyes locking onto hers. She quickly looked away, pretending to watch the blur of houses passing by. Beside her, another child whispered, "Why do you look so scared?" Amara swallowed hard. "Because he always says weird things to me." Yesterday, he stopped the bus and her voice trailed off, fear silencing her again. The other child shifted uncomfortably. Suddenly quiet too. As the bus pulled closer to the school, Amara prayed silently for her father. She knew he would never stop protecting her. She knew he believed her, even when no one else did. That belief gave her strength. Back at the corner, David climbed into his car as Officer Martinez directed him. "Follow us to the school. Stay close. We'll handle this carefully. If your daughter is right, we'll make sure he doesn't drive another child again." David gripped the steering wheel, his mind burning with questions. What exactly had this man done? Why was his daughter so afraid? And how long had it been happening without him knowing? The convoy of cars moved quickly, sirens off but tension thick. The school came into view, children already waiting outside for the arriving buses. The yellow bus slowed into the parking lot, but this time, 2 police vehicles boxed it in before it could unload. Children gasped and whispered as officers approached. Mr. Grayson stiffened in his seat, his hands tightening on the wheel. "Step out of the vehicle, sir," one officer commanded firmly. Amara's eyes widened. She pressed against the window, searching desperately for her father. When she saw his car pull in, her chest eased just slightly. He was here. David rushed forward. As the officers surrounded the driver, he caught sight of Amara through the glass, raising his hand to reassure her. She pressed her palm back against the window, relief washing over her small face. But as Mr. Grayson finally stepped out, his expression twisted, not fear, not guilt, but defiance. And David realized in that instant, whatever secrets this man carried, they weren't going to come out easily. This was only the beginning of the fight. The school parking lot was filled with silence heavier than steel. Children pressed their faces against the bus windows, wide-eyed, watching as officers ordered Mr. Grayson down the steps. Parents who had come to drop off their kids froze mid-step, their morning routines shattered by flashing lights. David stood at the edge of the lot, every muscle tense. His fists were clenched, not out of fear, but out of a father's fire. He wanted answers. Officer Martinez stepped closer to the driver. "Sir, you've been reported for suspicious behavior toward a minor. We need to ask you a few questions." Grayson scoffed, his voice low and gravelly. "Suspicious behavior? I've been driving kids for 20 years. You think one brat's tears mean anything?" The words made David's blood boil. He took a step forward, but the officer raised her hand, silently telling him to wait. This was delicate. Inside the bus, Amara's small frame shook. She could hear her father's voice outside, but fear still clung to her like a heavy blanket. She remembered every whispered word from the driver, every time his voice had dropped into that strange tone just for her. Yesterday was the worst when he stopped the bus for no reason on a quiet road. He had leaned close, too close, and said things she still couldn't repeat without trembling. Now seeing him argue with police, she felt her heart race again. What if they let him go? What if nobody believed her? One of the officers asked calmly, "Mr. Grayson, why did you stop the bus yesterday before arriving at school?" Grayson's eyes darted, his jaw tightening. "Mechanical check. These buses break down all the time." The officer frowned. "Was it reported to the district?" "No," he muttered. That hesitation was enough. David stepped closer, his voice ringing with sharp authority he didn't know he had. "You scared my daughter. She comes home crying every day. Yesterday she begged me not to put her on this bus again. What are you? Hiding?" Grayson's smirk returned, thin and cruel. "Kids cry, mister. Maybe you ought to toughen her up." The arrogance in his tone made every parent nearby shift uncomfortably. Whispers spread. The crowd of onlookers grew, tension thickening. Like storm clouds. Officer Martinez leaned in. "Sir, we're placing you on temporary suspension pending investigation. Step aside. We'll be speaking with the children, including this young girl, immediately." The driver bristled, but when two officers moved closer, he finally threw up his hands. "Fine, do your little witch hunt." As he was escorted away, Amara's eyes locked on her father's. Tears streamed down her cheeks. But this time they weren't only fear, they were relief. David rushed forward, and the bus doors opened. He climbed the steps two at a time, gathering his daughter in his arms. "I'm here, sweetheart," he whispered, holding her tight. "I told you, you're not alone." Her small voice quivered. Against his chest, "Daddy." He always looked at me like he was waiting for something. He would stop the bus sometimes and just stare. "Yesterday, he told me not to tell anyone." David's throat tightened. Every word was a blade. He kissed the top of her head, his heart breaking and burning all at once. Officer Martinez joined them. "Mr. Miller, we'll need a full statement from your daughter. We'll handle this with care, but we need her words." David nodded firmly. "She'll tell you everything. But I'm staying by her side." They walked together toward the cruiser, Amara clinging to her father's hand. Around them, parents whispered, some already making calls to the school district. No one wanted to imagine what might have happened if David hadn't acted this morning, but as they reached the car, David noticed something through the crowd. Mr. Grayson's eyes were still locked on him. Even as he was being placed in the back of a police vehicle, he smiled. It wasn't the smile of a man afraid of being caught. It was the smile of someone who thought the fight wasn't over. David felt a chill run through him. He had stopped the immediate danger. But deep down, he knew this was far from finished. The war for his daughter's safety had only begun. Asterisk. The small interview room at the local precinct felt colder than it should. The walls were plain, the air thick with silence. Amara sat beside her father, her feet barely reaching the edge of the chair. David kept his hand over hers, steady and warm, letting her know he wasn't going anywhere. Officer Martinez sat across from them, her notebook open, her voice gentle. Amara, you're very brave for talking with us. Can you tell me what the bus driver did that made you so upset? Amara's eyes flickered to her father. He nodded reassuringly. It's all right. Sweetheart, just say it in your own words. Her voice was small but clear. He always looked at me weird, like I wasn't safe. Sometimes he stopped the bus on a road with no people around. He leaned close and whispered things. What kinds of things? Martinez asked softly. Amara's hands twisted the strap of her backpack. He said I shouldn't tell anyone. He said if I did, nobody would believe me. Yesterday, he told me. He had a special place to show me soon. David's chest tightened so hard he had to clench his jaw to stay calm. He squeezed her hand. You did the right thing, Amara. You told me. You're safe now. Martinez's pen slowed, her expression grim. Mr. Miller, this is serious. We'll be opening a full investigation. Until then, Grayson will not be allowed to drive any bus. We'll also request access to his employment records. David exhaled sharply, a mix of relief and dread. I don't just want him off the bus. I want to know why he's been doing this. He's been trusted with children for years. How did no one see this before? The officer hesitated, then leaned closer. That's what worries me too. Outside the station, the world was moving as usual, but for David, every sound felt sharper. Every face unfamiliar. He was no longer just a father sending his daughter to school. He was a protector caught in a storm he hadn't chosen. Later that evening, after Amara had finally fallen asleep in her room, David sat in the living room, staring at the quiet phone on the table. He thought about the look Grayson had given him, the smile, the defiance. It haunted him. A knock at the door jolted him upright. He opened it to find Officer Martinez again, a folder tucked under her arm. I thought you should see this, she said, stepping inside. She laid the folder on the table. Preliminary background check. It's not good. David opened it, scanning quickly. His stomach churned. Grayson had been disciplined before for aggressive behavior, for complaints filed by parents years ago, but every report had been brushed aside, labeled as lack of evidence or misunderstanding. How many times? David's voice cracked with anger. 5 official complaints, Martinez replied. 3 were from children your daughter's age, 1 from a teacher. None of them stuck. David slammed the folder shut. So he's been doing this for years. And no one stopped him, the officer sighed. The district is known for protecting long-term employees. But with your 911 call and your daughter's testimony, this case can't be ignored anymore. David paced the floor, his hands running through his hair. He smiled at me today. Like he knew something. Like he wasn't afraid of any of this. Martinez nodded grimly. Men like him don't stop because of warnings. They stop when they're forced to. And we need to find out if he's already gone further with any child. The weight of those words pressed on David's chest like a boulder. He looked toward Amara's room, the faint glow of her nightlight spilling under the door. He whispered more to himself than to anyone else. This is war. He threatened my daughter, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep her safe. Martinez placed a card on the table. I'll be in touch tomorrow. But stay alert. If you notice anything unusual, anyone watching your house, following you, call immediately. I don't think Grayson is the type to back down quietly. When she left, the house felt heavier than before. David locked the doors, checked the windows twice, then finally sat in the dark, listening to every creak and shadow. For the first time, he realized this wasn't just about what happened on the bus stop. Something larger was hiding behind Grayson's smirk, and it was coming straight for them, Asterisk the next morning, David barely touched his coffee. His eyes were ringed with exhaustion, his ears tuned to every sound outside. The night had been long. Every creak of the floorboards, every car passing. The street made him rise from his chair to check the windows. Amara shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. She still clutched her teddy bear, her backpack resting against her leg. "Daddy," she whispered, "do I have to go to school today?" David crouched to her level, brushing her curls gently. "Not today, sweetheart. You'll stay home with me. You're safe here." Her relief was visible. She leaned against him, and for a brief moment, David allowed himself to breathe. But the knock on the door shattered the quiet. Officer Martinez stood outside, papers in hand. "Mr. Miller, we've dug deeper," she said as he let her in. "You were right, Grayson has a history. And it goes beyond this school district." David's brow furrowed. "Beyond?" Martinez laid down the papers. They were reports from another county years ago. Different bus routes, different children, same patterns. Whispers of misconduct, unexplained stops, strange complaints. Yet somehow he had slipped through cracks each time. "He's been moving between districts," Martinez explained. "Whenever complaints pile up, he resigns quietly and gets hired elsewhere. Each time, the records show voluntary resignation. No mention of the complaints. He's been shielded by paperwork." David clenched his fists. "So all this time, he's been circling children, and no one stopped him?" The officer nodded grimly. "That's why your case matters. This isn't the first time, but it can be the last." Before David could respond, his phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed on the screen. He hesitated, then answered. At first, only silence. Then a low, familiar voice. "You think you can ruin me, Miller? You think the cops will save you?" David's grip on the phone tightened. "Grayson." A chuckle slithered through the line. "Your little girl talks too much. You should have kept her quiet. Now you've made me angry." David's blood turned cold. "If you ever come near her again," Grayson cut him off. "Near her? Who says I ever left? You don't understand, do you? This isn't over." The line went dead. David stared at the phone, his heart hammering. "He called me," he said hoarsely to Martinez. "He still has my number. He's not in jail?" Martinez's jaw tightened. "He was released pending investigation. The district claims they don't have grounds to fire him without a formal charge." David slammed his fist on the table. "So they let him walk free. After everything Amara said, after all the reports." Martinez lowered her voice. "That call is evidence. We'll trace it. But you need to be careful. This man doesn't sound like he's going to back off." That evening, David drove Amara to his sister's house across town. He didn't want her sleeping in the same house. While Grayson roamed free. "It's just for a few nights," he told her, forcing a smile. "You'll be with Aunt Claire. I'll visit every day." Amara clung to his shirt. "Promise you'll be safe too?" "I promise," David whispered, though his chest ached with doubt. Asterisk. Back home alone, he checked every lock again. He sat by the window, watching the empty street. Hours passed. Midnight approached. Then, faintly, headlights cut across his front lawn. A car slowed, idling just beyond his driveway. David's breath caught. The silhouette of the driver was impossible to miss. Grayson. Even in the shadows, David could see him smiling. The car didn't move for minutes. It just sat there, the hum of its engine a reminder that danger was no longer distant. It was right outside his door. When the headlights finally dimmed and the car rolled away, David's resolve hardened. This wasn't just about reporting anymore. It was survival, and David knew he could never wait for the system alone to protect his daughter. Asterisk the next morning, David sat in his car outside the police precinct, exhaustion etched into his face. He hadn't slept. His mind replayed the image of Grayson's car idling outside his house. that twisted smile glowing faintly in the shadows. He walked inside, slamming the door behind him. Officer Martinez looked up from her desk, surprised. "Mr. Miller, you look like you haven't slept." "I haven't," David said sharply. "Grayson was outside my house last night, just sitting there watching. You said he was dangerous, so why is he free?" Martinez's expression hardened. "I believe you. But legally, until he makes a direct move, the district and the courts keep dragging their feet. We're building a case, but it takes time." David leaned closer, his voice low but full of fire. "Time is exactly what we don't have. My daughter is scared every second. He's not going to wait. Neither will I." Martinez hesitated, then pulled a thin folder from her desk. "I shouldn't show you this yet, but you deserve to know." She slid the folder across. Inside were copies of older reports. Parents complaining about their children being taken on detours. Kids crying without explanation. Teachers raising concerns. And one chilling line. Written years ago. Driver found parked with children on a remote road. Claimed bus had engine issues. No evidence of harm. Released without charge. David's stomach churned. He looked at Martinez. "How many children? How many times?" She lowered her voice. "Too many, and each time, paperwork buried it." David sat back, his hands shaking. He's been hunting children for years, and no one stopped him. Martinez's tone grew firm. "But now we know. And with your daughter's testimony, we can finally break the cycle. We'll need you both at the courthouse soon." David nodded, but inside, his anger burned hotter. The system failed too many times before. "I can't depend only on them." That evening, he returned to his sister's house to see Amara. She ran into his arms, clinging tightly. "Daddy, was he outside again?" she whispered. David kissed her forehead. "Not tonight. You're safe here, I promise." But his mind replayed Grayson's smile, that haunting phone call. He knew promises weren't enough. Later, as Amara drifted to sleep in her cousin's room, David stepped outside to the porch. His sister Claire joined him. "You're carrying the weight of the world," she said softly. He shook his head. "No, just the weight of protecting my little girl. And I'll carry it as far as I have to." Claire laid a hand on his shoulder. "Then don't carry it alone. Fight smart, not just hard." Her words settled deep. That night, David began making calls to lawyers, to parent groups, even to reporters who had once covered school scandals. If the district wanted to bury this story, he would drag it into the light. The next day, he drove back toward his house, cautious but determined. As he turned onto his street, his breath caught. On his front lawn, nailed to the wooden fence, was a note. He stepped out slowly, tearing it free. The handwriting was jagged, rushed. "You can't protect her forever." David's vision blurred with rage. His hands shook as he crumpled the note. He scanned the street, but it was empty. Grayson was taunting him, testing how far he could push before breaking. But David wasn't breaking. He was preparing. Inside the house, he loaded every lock, checked the windows again, then sat down with a pen and notebook. If the system wouldn't stop Grayson, David would map every step, every weakness, every time the man showed his face. Because now it wasn't just about Amara. It was about making sure Grayson never touched another child again. The war was no longer unexpected. It was personal. Asterisk, the story hit the news like a spark in dry grass. A local reporter, tipped off by David's late-night call, ran the headline the next morning. School bus driver under investigation after child's terrifying accusation. Within hours, parents flooded the district office with calls. Social media lit up with parents sharing their own uneasy memories, stories they'd never voiced until now. The district tried to release a calm statement, claiming they were cooperating fully with law enforcement. But no words could silence the anger spreading through the community. David watched the coverage on television, his jaw tight. This was what he wanted: light. No more shadows for Grayson to hide in. Yet, the victory felt fragile. He knew men. Like Grayson didn't crumble easily. At the precinct, Officer Martinez called him in. "Your push worked," she said. "The district is under fire. We've already found 3 more parents willing to testify." Grayson's record is finally catching up with him. David exhaled, tension leaving his shoulders for a moment. So this is it? He'll finally be stopped. Martinez's eyes, steady as ever, narrowed. Maybe, but last night, patrol reported his car circling near the elementary school. He's not backing down. The relief in David's chest turned to ice. He's still watching the children? Yes, we've increased presence around the schools, but he's slippery. He knows how to stay just out of reach. That evening, David returned to Claire's house to check on Amara. She was drawing. At the table, her crayons scattered around. When she saw him, her face brightened. "Daddy, look, I drew us at the park." "You're holding my hand." David knelt beside her, studying the picture. His heart ached at her innocence. Even after all this, she just wanted to feel safe with him. He kissed her forehead. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." But the moment was shattered by Claire rushing in from the porch, her face pale. "David, look outside." David hurried. To the window, parked across the street, was a dark car. Headlights off, engine silent. But the outline of a man behind the wheel was clear. Grayson. David's blood boiled. He stormed toward the door, but Claire grabbed his arm. "No, that's what he wants you to snap. Call the police." David's hand trembled as he gripped his phone. The line connected quickly, but when patrol arrived minutes later, the car was gone. Again, no trace left but fear. That night, as Amara slept peacefully in her cousin's room, David sat awake with Martinez's warning echoing in his mind. Slippery. Just out of reach. He knew then that Grayson wasn't simply watching. He was planning. Testing how far he could push. And David realized something else. The police could guard schools. The district could make statements. Reporters could write stories. But when it came down to it, Grayson's war was against him, father to father, man to man. The next morning, David stood before a crowd of parents gathered outside the school. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. He raised his voice, clear and unshaken. "This isn't just about my daughter. It's about every child who was ignored, every parent who wasn't heard. The system failed us, but we won't be silent anymore. We'll fight until he can never touch another child again." The crowd erupted in cheers and chants. Parents raised signs, reporters scribbled notes, and for the first time, David didn't feel alone. But as he scanned the faces in the crowd, his stomach twisted. Across the street, leaning against a tree, stood Grayson. No disguise, no fear, just that same crooked smile. His eyes locked on David. It was a message louder than any words. This isn't over, and David knew the final confrontation was coming. The protest outside Jefferson Elementary grew larger with every passing day. Parents carried signs, reporters swarmed, and the district scrambled under the weight of public outrage. But for David, none of it mattered if Grayson was still free. Still circling like a shadow around his daughter. That night, back at Claire's house, David sat at the dining table with Officer Martinez. A map of the town lay spread before them, marked with pins where patrol units had spotted Grayson's car in recent days. "He's circling schools, playgrounds, even the library," Martinez said grimly. "He's watching, but never long enough for us to make an arrest. He knows the law too well." David rubbed his temples. "So he's daring us to catch him." "Daring me." Martinez leaned forward. "That may be true. But today we got a break. An anonymous parent came forward. Said years ago, Grayson tried to lure her child off the bus. We now have enough to file charges. We just need to bring him in." As if on cue, David's phone buzzed. A message. No number. Just words that made his blood run cold. "She's mine. Tonight." David's chair screeched back. He's coming here. Martinez was already on her radio, calling in backup. Stay inside. Keep Amara safe. But David's instincts wouldn't. Let him sit. He checked the locks, then ran upstairs to Amara's room. She was awake, clutching her teddy bear, eyes wide. Daddy, I heard. Is he coming? David knelt by her bed, voice steady but fierce. Not tonight, sweetheart. Tonight he's finished. Moments later, headlights swept across the street. The same dark car idled outside. Grayson stepped out this time, bold and unafraid. He didn't bother with shadows. He wanted David to see him, David's fists clenched, every muscle ready to charge. But before he could move, police cruisers roared into the street, lights flashing. Officers poured out, surrounding Grayson with weapons drawn. For the first time, his smirk faltered. Richard Grayson, Martinez's voice rang out. You're under arrest for child endangerment, harassment, and multiple counts of misconduct. Put your hands where we can see them. Grayson's eyes flickered, scanning for escape. But there was none. Slowly, he raised his hands. The defiance lingered in his face. But the war he had waged in silence for years was finally collapsing. Amara peeked through the curtains upstairs, holding her teddy bear tight. She saw the man who haunted her steps, now in handcuffs, dragged into the back of a cruiser. She turned to her father. Is it over, Daddy? David pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Yes, sweetheart, it's over. You're safe now. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but this time they weren't from fear. She whispered, You believed me. You fought for me. David kissed her forehead. Always. That's what fathers do. The following week, the district held an emergency meeting. Grayson was banned from all school property. His history of complaints finally laid bare for the public. Investigations spread to other districts he had worked in. Parents demanded reform, demanding that no one like him slip through the cracks. Again, for David, the fight had been more than against one man, it had been against a broken system. But he had won, because his daughter's voice had been heard. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, David and Amara walked hand in hand through the park. She skipped along the path, her laughter rising like music. For the first time in weeks, she looked free again. David breathed in the warm air, his heart lighter. The war was over, and he had kept his promise.